If you haven't been with us the last couple of weeks, we started this series called Back to Your Future. And what we're talking about is the book of Proverbs. We're kind of studying the book of Proverbs. And if those of you aren't familiar with the Bible, Proverbs is an Old Testament book. It's from the Hebrew Bible, from the Tanakh, if you're Jewish. Anybody Jewish? Just kidding. And the genre of Proverbs is unique. It's not poetry like, say, the Psalms or the first few chapters of Genesis. It's not narrative. It's wisdom. It's what was that guy on Saturday Night Live when we were all growing up? Deep Thoughts by Jack Handy. But it's God-anointed Jack Handy. It's wisdom from life. And if you believe about the Bible, what I believe about the Bible, and what many of you believe about the Bible, it's not just wisdom and observations about life. It's from God. And so we've got to be careful because they're not formulas and they're not even promises. They're observations about what typically works best. And what we've observed in general about the book of Proverbs is that it's a book that says, hey, your decisions matter. So don't get careless. Don't let your guard down, because even those seemingly insignificant decisions, they grow up, they mature, and they mature into your future. Like your past becomes your future, is what we're saying. And so one of the really challenges of this series, and I just kind of continue to extend that to you, and I have had some good feedback from many of you, by the way, is one of the challenges has been there's 31 chapters in Proverbs. For females, there's 31 chapters. For males, there's 30. So you get the pass on chapter 31 because it's all about the wife, right? So, dudes, you get the 31st of the month off. Ladies, sorry, you got to work harder. It's kind of your lot in life. That was supposed to be a compliment. It is a compliment. Okay, so, but the challenge has been that there's 31 chapters in the book of Proverbs. If you read a chapter a day, it takes you about 2 minutes. So if you just pay attention to what the day and the month is, and you read that proverb, then in a month you've read the whole book, and in a year you've read it 12 times, and thus in a decade, well, a lot of good will come from that. How you doing with that? Doing all right? Yeah. You don't have to raise your hands because none of you did last time either, and then you all emailed me. So, good job. So, we've obviously been using Back to the Future to kind of capture this theme, because if you remember, like, that's really the theme of Back to the Future is, like, you go to the past and you screw up your future, and if you want to fix your future, you go to your past, those types of things. Did you realize that, you know what year they went forward to the future to in Back to the Future? 2015. How old does that make you feel? You are living in the future. So what we started by saying was that, of course, your past is your future. And then what we did last week was we started to say, okay, we can get more specific than that, because the book of Proverbs gets more specific than that there's these categories that you can put in that blank that says, like, your past blank is your future. And last week we talked about this idea of the who, that it's your past who, which isn't Dr. Seuss and it's not the band, that would be bad, but the people in your life. Remember, and if you weren't with us last week, then you can always grab a podcast, but what we did is we dealt everybody 5 cards. That was offensive. And then what we said is, right, like, some of you know the game of poker so well that if I showed you the cards in my hand, you would tell me whether or not I should fold. And what the book of Proverbs is saying is, you want to know what your future looks like, show me who the people in your life are. Show me who the people that you're giving an audience to. Show me who you're listening to. Show me whose jokes you're laughing at. Show me where you're spending your time and who you're spending it with. That's your future. This week's category is a little bit more difficult for me to put a title to. To be sure, there's a whole bunch of Proverbs, and if you've started reading through the book, you'll recognize many of these, I'm sure. There's a whole bunch of Proverbs, and you could label them, like, you could give it the categorical name of, like, planning, of goal setting, of visioneering, of discipline. Like, there's lots of different names that you could give it, but no matter what name you give it, what you're struck by, if you're familiar with the book of Proverbs, and if you're not, then you will be by the end of the month, right, is that there's an overwhelming number of them. So last week I was sitting in my chair going, like, how do I illustrate this idea of there's like a million of these things, and I really had this idea that I wanted to get a box of something and dump it all over the stage. And so what I did was we bought a bag of spherical objects. What I want to do is I'm going to read you a bunch of Proverbs. Oh, yeah, good job. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. That's Proverbs 13:12. Nice catch. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Nice job. Proverbs 12:24. Diligent hands will rule. So you see this theme of diligent and work ethic, but laziness ends in forced labor. Wow. I watched you play a whole dodgeball tournament and your arms never left your side and you just did it. So nice job. That was practice for next year. That's so awesome. Could we just pray? All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Sarah, who do you want me to kick it at? Because they're all picking on you. Just kidding. I got to pick a different direction, huh? How about this one? Okay. I went past the field of a sluggard, past the vineyard of someone who has no sense. Thorns had come up everywhere. The ground was covered with weeds, and the stone wall was in ruins. I applied my heart to what I observed and learned a lesson from what I saw. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come on you like a thief. Scarcity like an armed man. Ready? I'm a little afraid of those lights. Nice catch. It's yours. That's your prize. We don't have a third service. The lazy do not roast any game, but the diligent feed on the riches of the hunt. Here's the one that we're actually going to drill down on this morning. A sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. I'm trying to figure out if I could get one up there without lodging glass from that bulb into your eyeball. I think I'll pass. Strawberry, this one would hurt. The appetite of laborers works for them. Their hunger drives them on. Those who work their land will have abundant food, but those who chase fantasies have no sense. One more. A longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul. Okay. It doesn't matter how you label it. What I want us to kind of drill down on, and I'm just going to kind of warn you this morning, is going to maybe feel a little bit more like college than a sermon, and I'm okay with that because it's an exception. What I want us to begin to notice is that what Proverbs talk a lot about is not just hard work per se, but the hard work of planning. Like what Proverbs spend a lot of energy saying is not just, hey, like it's important that you work hard, but hey, like actually making ideas a reality, that's where the work is. Like having goals, having ambitions, that's easy. But having goals that actually become something that you can touch and feel that become your future, that's the hard work. In other words, like your past planning is your future, your past ideas are not. That's kind of where I want to go this morning. I was meeting, it's been a couple months ago now, and I was meeting with a friend of mine who is a very accomplished businessman in our community, and much more so than I ever will be, different sector, of course, but a great businessman. And as we were talking, he was sharing, and I didn't know that we were going to go there as we were talking, but he was sharing some of this frustration that he feels with regard to his job because when he started his company, these are his words, not mine, like it wasn't just supposed to be about making a lot of money. He wanted his company to matter. He was a Christ-following guy, and when he founded his company, of course, he's all for business and he's all for making money, and that's great, but he also, he wanted his business to contribute to the common good in Helena in ways much like we do as a church. And what he was sharing is, as he was sharing that, actually, I kind of interjected and began to point out, because I have some instances in my own life where he's partnered with us and served people both on a one-on-one level and in other different ways via Narrate, and I was kind of pointing those out as success stories, and it became clear like he didn't want to hear those. He wasn't looking for any false reassurance or any real reassurance from me. I mean, he began to say like, no, it was supposed to be much bigger than that. Like, that's great. I had something much more grand in mind. And then as he continued to talk, it became clear that his frustrations are of a very cyclical nature. That he kind of, this frustration with life and where it's not headed kind of comes in waves. And I found myself, 20 minutes into that meeting in this really awkward spot because on the one hand, I mean, who am I? I don't run dozens and dozens. I don't know how many employees. Like I don't have a leg to stand on in this conversation. And yet what made it awkward was I did have a really strong opinion about some things he could do and some steps he could take to move forward in this regard. The next day, I was sitting down with a guy who's in his younger 20s, and this is the type of young leader that if you own a business and you met this guy, you'd want to hire him. Hardworking, intelligent, incredibly driven. And so as I was talking to him, he began to share, and from my estimation, he's in a pretty good position. He's got a pretty good job and headed in a pretty good direction. But he began to share that he was essentially stressed out, and I don't know that he used those words, but that's what was clear as you sat across the table from him, was that he's kind of stressed out and even a little depressed because when he graduated high school, et cetera, he had these dreams these desires, these goals, these ambitions. And here he is at 22 years old. And not only does he doubt that he's never going to accomplish them, he doesn't even have a clue how to get there. And it was in that season where I had this overwhelming sense of like, Proverbs talks about this. We've got to go there. And what I want to say on the front end as kind of a retainer is I've not arrived in this regard. I'm going to speak maybe with a little more know-it-all-ness to it this morning, not because I view myself in those terms, but because part of what those conversations, and there have been many others revealed to me in that season, was that like I was the recipient of some really good leadership for 10 years. Like as I worked under Vern in Billings and under Brian in Billings, and for those 10 years that I was kind of brought up through leading student ministry and 20-something ministry, it became clear to me that those guys did a remarkably good job of helping me understand that leadership and life isn't about ideas. It's about actually fleshing those ideas out and making them happen. And I suspect that like you, like me, you can relate to the tension that my two friends felt. Like whether you're a parent of young kids, or even a stay-at-home parent or a single parent, and you like your kids, you love your kids, you enjoy taking care of them, but there are these moments where you're like, will life ever get to be about those dreams, those ambitions? Will I ever get to pursue anything for myself, so to speak? Like, will I ever have time to myself? Will I ever have time to further my education or pursue this dream or any of the above? I suspect that tension's real similar. Like, will it ever happen? Or maybe you're a graphic artist stuck in an accounting department. And there's this sense of like, okay, so am I just supposed to let that die? Maybe in your 60s. I was talking to someone between services who falls into this category. And there's this sense of like, I still have all these ideas and all this ambition, and yet everything about life says, you had your chance. Like, you're in the decline. You don't get to do anything significant with your life now. Like, maybe you're someone that has a good job, but what you mean by good is it provides for you and it provides for your family. What you don't mean by good is it's fulfilling and it touches like what you're passionate about. And then there's this, like there's those types of ideas that fall under like the career and education and future and grandness, of the future. But then there's like little stuff too, isn't there? Like every once in a while you have these daydreams about the desires that you have to grow yourself spiritually, to find a good mentor, to schedule date nights. There's these moments where you have these daydreams about, man, I would love to get in shape. I would love to join a gym. I would love to run a marathon someday. I'd love to go on a mission trip. See, what I think these Proverbs do is I want to suggest to you, is it's God reaching into our world, and there is a lot of wisdom in there, and the wisdom deals with how do you go from an idea to a reality? How do you move from being someone who just runs your mouth to someone that actually does? Now, the downside of everything we're going to talk about, the downside is if you give yourself to this too much, or if you give yourself to this in an unhealthy fashion, you'll become gross. You'll become undesirable. You'll become the very type of person that no one wants to spend time with. Because it's possible to get so passionate and so intentional and so goal-driven and so focused and so fixated on ideas and dreams and plans for the future that also what happens is you become utterly self-absorbed. And no one wants to be around you because your life is all about you and your goals and your dreams and your ambitions and your future and your finances. And the reality is God never calls us to that kind of life. God from the very beginning is looking for a people, not a person. He's looking for people who will collaborate together, not a bunch of individuals who go do their own thing and never team up. But the dark side for sure is that you can become utterly self-absorbed, and I think it bears saying that God never leads us to that level of self-absorption. The upside, though, is we become a people who get satisfaction of accomplishment. The upside is we become the people who are filled with hope, not only because of Christ and his return, but because we can see the future and we look forward to the future because we have ideas and plans and things to do in the future. The upside is we're not just people who run our mouths and talk, we're people who do. I love the way this leader said it. He says everything in life is either goal achieving or tension relieving. Doesn't that kind of hit you in the gut? Like in everything we do in life, he's saying, either accomplishing something for a purpose or we're relieving some tension. And I think the upside of fleshing this stuff out is we spend a lot more energy accomplishing goals rather than surfing the web. Like the upside is you might not be in the dream job. And you don't particularly care because you've got a plan. And whether that allows for you to grow within that organization or requires that you get a new job in another organization, you've got a plan. The upside is you won't always be in debt. Because you don't just have an idea for how to get out of debt, you've got a plan for how to get out of debt. And the proverb that I really want us to bear down on, it's become one of my favorite verses in the whole Bible in the last couple months. Though it's really weird. I've tried really hard to memorize it and I can't. Haven't. Can't would be bad language. A sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. Like a sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. So here's a question. Do lazy people have goals? Do lazy people have ideas? Do lazy people daydream on runs or on walks or on drives or while they're eating lunch or while they're laying in bed? Do they have ideas? They do, don't they? The difference is, well, there's a difference, but it doesn't have to do with the fact that lazy people don't have ideas. And again, kind of that warning tone of Proverbs is, hey, remember, like even lazy people have ideas. Even lazy people dream up these really wonderful ideas about their marriage and their future, about a business. I think George from Seinfeld captures this very well.
Guess what?
How did you know I was here?
Kramer, guess what?
I don't know.
I quit my job.
Get out of here.
Couldn't take it anymore.
You can have this on Monday. What happened, Levitan?
I go in to use his private bathroom. Everybody uses it. And then I get a memo telling me to use the men's room in the hall. I mean, we share it with Pace Electronics. It's disgusting.
You and your toilets.
It was the last straw.
So what are you going to do now? You going to look for something else in real estate?
Nobody's hiring now. The market's terrible.
So what are you going to do?
I like sports. I could do something in sports.
In what capacity?
You know, like the general manager of a baseball team.
Yeah, well, that can be tough to get.
Well, it doesn't even have to be the general manager. Maybe I could be like an announcer, like a color man. You know how I always make those interesting comments during the game?
Yeah, you make good comments.
So what about that?
Well, you know, they tend to give those jobs to ex-ball players and people that are, you know, in broadcasting.
Well, that's really not fair.
I know. Well, okay. What else do you like?
Movies. I like to watch movies.
Yeah.
Do they pay people to watch movies?
Projectionists.
That's true.
But you gotta know how to work the projector.
Right.
And it's probably a union thing.
Those unions. Okay, sports, movies. What about a talk show host?
Talk show host, that's good.
I think I'd be good at that. I talk to people all the time. Someone even told me once they thought I'd be a good talk show host.
Really?
Yeah, a couple of people. How do you get that, though? Where do you start?
Well, that's where it gets tricky.
You can't just walk into a building and say, I want to be a talk show host.
I wouldn't think so.
It's all politics.
All right, okay. Sports, movies, talk show hosts. What else?
This could have been a huge mistake.
A sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. Couldn't we say that what's being contrasted here is not one person who has ideas and another who doesn't, not one type of person who has the ability to dream up ideas and another who doesn't? What's being contrasted here is one type of person who has the type of skill needed to make an idea reality and another type of person who doesn't. The key word there is diligence, right? It's one person has the diligence necessary to make an idea actually happen, and one person is just an idea person. And it strikes me that, like, all of us have a little bit of George in us. All of us are prone to thinking that life and the future is about having an idea, when in fact what Proverbs says is, hey, there's lots of lazy people. There's lots of people who don't really get anywhere in life who had lots of really great ideas. Some really bad ones too. But the difference between those who accomplish things and move forward with their life and contribute to God's kingdom and actually improve their marriage and grow spiritually and grow intellectually, the difference between them and those who don't, it's not those who had the ideas, it's those that had the follow-through. Like one type of person gets to experience the satisfaction of accomplishment, and the other doesn't. Which is where I'm coming at it from Proverbs. Like, your past planning is your future. It would be really nice if our past ideas were our future, but everything in life says, no, your ideas have very little to do with your future. It's your planning of those ideas. That's your future. I love the way a couple of other Proverbs that we read, Proverbs 13:12 says, hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a longing fulfilled is a tree of life. That's what we're after, right? 13:19a says, a longing fulfilled is sweet to the soul. So what I want to do is kind of dive in and get kind of systematic here and go, okay, so what do we do? Like, how do we become the type of person whose desires are fully satisfied? How do we become that category of person, not like George, but the type that we want to be? But before we assume you have dreams, I want to start there. Maybe you've lost your capacity to hope, to dream, to visioneer, to think, to imagine a different kind of future. You know, one of the more vivid pieces of leadership advice I got from my friend Brian, who leads Journey in Bozeman, has been several years ago, but he said to me, Adam, if you're not finding time in your week to put your feet up on the desk and dream, you're managing, but you're not leading. And that's a challenge. It's a challenge first because it seems lazy. It seems like we're always supposed to be productive, and so to find time in our evening or time in our day where we turn away from our computer and turn away from our TV and turn away from our phone and turn away from our task list and just imagine what could be in our marriage, in our future, in our company, in the kingdom, in the people's lives whom we serve, to do that kind of work, well, it's work. And maybe you're the type of person that is so caught up in the grind of life, and fairly so. You've got kids, you've got a spouse, you've got a job, you've got kids and no spouse. I mean, maybe it's just all you can do to survive. And maybe the one takeaway from this morning is the importance of just finding time in your life to hope for your marriage, for your future, for your education, for your child, for your physical health, for your finances, for your relationship with God. Dave Ramsey is one of many that have used this wheel. He's the one that introduced me to it, this goal wheel. I mean, maybe for you the takeaway, and I realize if you're not a goal person, then that's overwhelming, but what the experts in this field would say is that we should have goals related to all 7 of those categories, and you don't have to write them down. There's a notes page as you go if you want to grab one of those. That wheel is on there. Maybe for you the takeaway is just spending some energy going, okay, one category. I got to start with some goals. I got to start thinking in these directions. Maybe you're intensely annoyed this morning because this kind of seems like one of those self-help deals where it's all about you and not about God. Well, I'll bet you there was a time when you used to dream. And again, maybe the one challenge for you is finding time in your week to just imagine what could be, wherever you want to apply that. So what do we do once we have goals? Or what do we do once we have ideas? What do we do once we have vision? Like my friend, the businessman, had them. He had the ideas. My friend, the 20-something leader, he had the ideas. What do we do from there? Vern, my friend in Billings, who I worked for a decade and leads Harvest, my last memory of interacting with him, and I don't remember what led to this interaction, but my last memory with him was I was in my office, and I know that's why I remember it, because he wasn't the type of leader who dropped in on us. But I was in my office, and he was in my office, obviously, and to give you some context, at this season in Harvest life, it was kind of a tumultuous season because Harvest had had decided several years ago that we were going to build a swimming center for the Heights area of Billings, and there's a whole backstory to that and how it's 20% of the population, but it always got voted down because of that 20%, and so we as a church went like, we'll build it, and we'll give it to the community. And so we went through a capital campaign, and that didn't raise all the money needed, and then we were at this season in a second capital campaign, and it was getting a little exhausting and a little divisive. There were people leaving the church over the issue. It was, in my estimation, the first thing as a church that God called us to that didn't come rapidly and easily for us. I mean, things just kind of were smooth sailing up until that point. And so that's the context. Vern is in my office. I'm sharing with him ideas about Helena and Narrate and this church, and he looked at me, and I'll never forget, he wasn't crying, but his eyes were clearly watery, and he looked at me and he said, Adam, don't ever forget that vision is cheap, that vision is easy. It doesn't take any work to have an idea. It doesn't take any work to have a picture for a different kind of future, which is an idea that Proverbs captures in 14, right? When it said, we read it earlier, all hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. So how do we be the type of people, not like George, but who actually do the hard work of planning? That's what I want to get into. And here's, well, I'm going to be pretty blunt and opinionated this morning, which I like to think of myself as not doing that very often. So if you don't like it, then come back next week and I'll be meek and mild again, hopefully. I think it boils down to these two things: a yellow pad and a calendar. And you go, oh, wait a minute, this isn't in the Bible. Well, yeah, we get to contextualize what the Bible's saying about how do we be the type of people who actually make ideas happen. How do we be those type of fulfilled people? And I can't imagine, nor do I know a leader who's successful at doing this, or a person who's successful at doing this, who hasn't mastered the art of these two things: a yellow pad and a calendar. The yellow pad's about this. You have ideas. You're driving to work, and you think, man, I should really organize a date night with my spouse. You're driving to work, and you think, man, I should really buy a pull-up bar. You have ideas for your marriage, for your business, for your family, for your kids. You have ideas about books that you want to read and relationships you want to form and areas where you want to serve. You have ideas. If intentions were all that mattered, then we would all be golden, right? Like, that's what this proverb is saying. But unfortunately, it's not about intentions. We have ideas. The problem is we don't write them down. We don't take notes of them. We don't go like, okay, yeah, that's right. I'm going to read that book. I want to memorize that verse. I want to call that person and ask how this is going in their life. The problem is we don't write them down. The guy who wrote Getting Things Done, kind of an industry standard in this whole discipline of life and business, one of the things he talks about is that stress comes from not writing things down. That what happens is we remember we need to pay this bill or we want to call this person, and when we try to that grunt thing you do in your brain, when we do that, what we do is we create stress in our life. And the moment you write it down, the stress is gone, if it's a functional system. Which is why, for me, like if I'm sitting across the table talking leadership, talking vision, talking anything of this sorts with somebody, I'm just going to tell you how judgmental I am, because I know you are too, and it'll feel better if you know that I am. Oh, you didn't even laugh. When I sit across the table from somebody and talk leadership and ideas, and we're talking, and there's nothing getting written down, I'm instantly perturbed. And if you're a manager, if you're a leader, if you're in a company and you lead, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because the sense is like, why are we talking? Like, we're wasting our time right now. Like, no, you're not writing anything down. Nothing's going to come of this. What's going to come of this is a month later we're going to meet again, and I'm going to go, how did that go? And you're going to go, oh yeah, I forgot all about it. Like, you got to write stuff down. It doesn't make you dumb. It makes you disciplined. And here's where the calendar piece comes in. By the way, like lots of us carry phones, right, that are really good at these. I will say this. If I hadn't learned the discipline on here, there's no way I'd be able to use it here effectively. Like sometimes technology is more of a distraction than it is an aid. I leave that with you. The same goes with the calendar. And here's where the calendaring piece comes in. Because you create time, and this is back to, I forget that guy's name that wrote Getting Things Done. You schedule time in your week where you go, hey, I'm going to work on my yellow pad. I'm just going to take an hour tonight. I'm going to take an hour tomorrow. I'm going to take an hour sometime this week, and I'm just going to work through my yellow pad. And the discipline goes like this. If it can be done in 2 minutes or less, then you do it. You just do it. Send the email, make the phone call. Can't make a phone call in 2 minutes. Send a text message. Like if it can be done in 2 minutes or less, you do it. And then you come across things and you go, wow, this says I had this idea driving to work that I should think about going to the COT and getting a degree. Can't do that in 2 minutes. This says that I was talking to some friends and they said, hey, we should start at Ales for Trails in Helena. Wow, can't do that in 2 minutes. And what you do is that thing comes off the page and you go to your calendar, hence the essence of the calendar, and you go, when can I give an hour to thinking through this idea? When can I give 2 hours to strategizing? Because the deal is, you're going to have a lot of really bad ideas. I have more than you do. You got to create time to pursue them, and oftentimes you'll go like, no, that was the endorphins from the run. That's a terrible idea, so nope, not doing that. Sometimes you go like, that's a fantastic idea, and you have this time in your day where you're actually working on it, and you're going to dedicate to it, and you're going to go like, wow, I want to be a professional musician someday, so maybe I should figure out where I can do some shows in Helena first. Okay, I'm going to spend an hour lining out all the different venues, and then I'm going to spend an hour the next week figuring out when I could do this. Now, I know what you're thinking. I don't have that type of time. Here's the deal, and you won't like it, because it grates against everything that we assume. You go to Hastings and start pulling off entrepreneur books off the shelf. You go to Hastings and you start pulling books about creativity, which is really what we're talking about, right? Like making things a reality. Anybody who is, as my friend Brian would say, worth their salt in this field, what they'll tell you is time's not the issue. In fact, when it comes to the creative process, an excess of time is far more of a hindrance than it is an aid. This is why you did your best work in college the night before it was due. Because when you have the whole semester, you don't do your best work then. Your best work is done when there is restraints financially and when there are restraints to your time. One guy said it this way: establishing and keeping a routine can be even more important than having a lot of time. So you got a calendar, you got a notepad, and you're going, now all I need is a job like yours, Adam, like cushy. You just work on Sundays, you sit around, you dream up things like Ales for Trails, like anybody can do that. Okay, fair enough. Pick one thing, one idea. Maybe it has to do with your marriage. Maybe it has to do with your health. Maybe it has to do with your relationship with God. Maybe there's a relationship, a mentoring relationship that you want to form with somebody. Pick one idea. If that's all you got time for, pick one. And you watch what happens with the energy that comes from accomplishing things. See, what the Proverbs is telling us is people who have lots of ideas but don't ever make any of them happen, like it's a big black hole and it gets deeper and darker. And people who actually accomplish things, it's not, is it, that they accomplish everything? It's not that every idea they have actually comes to fruition. It's that enough of them do that they're satisfied. My friend, the businessman, so when I interjected, hopefully humbly, I went, dude, here's the deal. Like, how many hours a week do you spend just dreaming up ideas for the way your business could serve Helena? I don't have time for that, he said. I said, well, pay your fee and make your choice. You can't have both. Like, my 2 cents of advice to him was you got to start scheduling some time where you get to dream, and then you got to start scheduling some time where you figure out how to make those dreams reality. And until you do that, this cycle will repeat itself, I promise. And you'll be another business who had really good intentions, but never did it. My friend, the 22-year-old, the type of guy that any business owner here would want to hire, his deal was that at 30 years old, he'd love to be playing music all over the world. And he very well could have the ability to do that. And yet, like, you can relate. It seemed impossible. It seemed silly. It seemed doable at 17. At 22, it seemed impossible. And so what do? You begin to break it down and go, okay, dude, what's that going to require? Well, what's it going to require financially? Let's start there. Well, you probably better not have any bills. Be good to not have any car payments if you're going to go to London and play a concert. So let's talk about debt. Okay, so we got some numbers on the page. And before we knew it, in an hour's time, we had a strategy for how, without a lot of work, he could be out of debt in like 18 months. Oh, okay. And then, dude, if you're going to play a concert in London someday, do you think you should play a few in Helena this year? Yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. Okay, so now you got to find a time to begin to brainstorm, like, what are all the venues that host concerts? And then after you've created the time to do that, now you need to find the time to figure out, like, okay, how do I contact those? Or maybe there's a person, someone like Kevin, someone like Lenny, someone like Rick. Maybe there's a person who plays a lot of concerts, and you need to get an hour with them and begin to visioneer and brainstorm with them about how to go about those things. I know I'm risking being patronizing. The goal is to be the type of people who aren't idea people, but are people who accomplish things. I love the way this guy that I can't pronounce his name said it. He says, be regular and orderly in your life, so you may be violent and original in your work. You know, we look at guys like Jerry Seinfeld and some of the best musicians out there, and we think they're the most free spirit people who are fun and fancy free, and they just kind of do their thing. What every one of them will tell you is they're nerds. They follow a schedule. They have a routine to their life. The best artists, they're not all over the place bouncing around, showing up to work when they feel like it. They're disciplined and studious and driven, and that's what gives them the perception. Not the perception. That's what makes them creative, because they plan it. Or, as the way Proverbs says it, a sluggard's appetite is never filled, but the desires of the diligent are fully satisfied. If you're a guest with us, we've not talked about the cross, and I apologize for that. Here's the deal. God made you. He made you to be a part of a people. Life is not about you. It's about him. It's his story, not yours. And yet, all that being true, you matter. And he wants you to matter. And he wants you to contribute. And he wants you to accomplish more than you could have ever dreamed accomplishing. But it takes discipline. Let me pray. God, it strikes me that we should be among the most driven, accomplished, creative business people and leaders and parents and friends in our community. And God, we live in a culture that celebrates its celebrities, it celebrates its artists. And sometimes I feel like we get caught up thinking that like we can be that without any work. So God, my prayer, and you know this, but my prayer for this week is that out of this would come a people who are driven and hardworking, the realizer of dreams, not just the hoper of dreams. God, we love you. Amen.